My stepmother forced herself into the hospital and said she hoped my baby died in the NICU, so I'd finally learn the worth of family. So I said that her son ending it all was her fault. I, 29F, went into labor at 29 weeks. It was sudden and terrifying. One day I was dealing with mild swelling and elevated blood pressure, and the next, I was being rushed into emergency surgery with severe preeclampsia. I didn't have time to think, to prepare, to breathe. I was terrified for myself, but even more terrified for my baby, who wasn't supposed to be born for almost 3 more months. When they wheeled me in, I was shaking, crying, not from pain but from fear. I barely remember calling my mom. Everything was a blur. She came immediately. I found out later she called my dad too, just to keep him in the loop. My mom and I are close, and I'd made my wishes crystal clear to everyone months ago. If something went wrong during the delivery, I only wanted her and my husband in the room, no one else. I even wrote it down in my birth plan and had it filed with the hospital. It was one of the few things I felt in control of. Now here's where the real mess begins. My dad is married to Janet. She's been in my life since I was 8 years old. I won't sugarcoat it. My relationship with her has always been complicated, even traumatic. When I was a kid, she'd lock me in my room for hours as punishment, scream at me for crying, cut my hair out of spite when I talked back, and routinely threw away my clothes or withheld food if I disrespected her. She had this cold, calculating way of twisting every situation into being about her, and somehow my dad never saw a problem. He'd say she just had a different parenting style. I started therapy at 18 when I finally got out of that house, and I've worked hard over the years to untangle all of the damage she caused. But because of my dad, I've kept a surface-level relationship with Janet. Polite, distant, fake. For birthdays or holidays, we smile and nod. But I never, ever intended for her to be part of something as vulnerable and life-altering as childbirth. And I told everyone that. So imagine my horror when I wake up post-surgery, groggy from the spinal block and still dizzy from anesthesia, and I find out that Janet showed up at the hospital. Not just showed up, but caused a whole scene. According to my husband, she was wailing in the waiting room, saying she was excluded again, that no one ever thinks of her, and that it wasn't fair she was being shut out of the family moment. Keep in mind, I had just undergone an emergency C-section to deliver a severely premature baby who was immediately taken to the NICU. I was barely conscious. My birth plan was on file. She was not supposed to be there, period. The nurses, bless them, stuck to my plan and only allowed my husband and my mom into the delivery area. When Janet wasn't allowed through, she lost it. My dad came into my recovery room not long after and started lecturing me about how cruel I was being. That Janet is a grandmother too, and that she deserves to be part of the experience. I was lying there, pale, shaking, not even able to sit up straight, and he was telling me I was heartless. I told him I didn't want to talk about Janet right now, that I just wanted peace, that I was scared for my baby, but he wouldn't let it go. He kept saying, family is everything, and don't push people away when they're trying to support you. Later that day, Janet tried to force her way into the NICU visitor list. She told the front desk nurse that she was the grandmother, and she needed to see her baby. When they told her NICU visitation was restricted to only the parents at this stage, she completely lost it. She came storming into my room like a woman possessed. She stood at the foot of my bed, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "You'll see what happens when you push people away. Maybe when that baby dies in the NICU, you'll finally understand that family is all you've got." Yes, she said that to me. While I was hooked up to IVs, bleeding internally, and unsure if my son was going to make it through the night. And something in me just snapped. I sat up as best I could and said, "You want to talk about pushing people away? Maybe if you hadn't crushed every person who ever loved you, your own son would still be alive." For context, my stepbrother, her biological son, died by suicide 3 years ago. He was 22. He had struggled for years, especially after coming out, and he always said Janet made him feel like a failure. She never accepted him. I said, "He was suffocating under your judgment. And now here you are still doing it. If he were here now, he'd be ashamed of you. I hate you." She gasped like I'd struck her. My dad just stared at me, stunned. Then she turned and stormed out. My dad followed her without a word to me. The room felt ice cold after they left, and then I broke down. Completely. Ugly crying, the kind that feels like your soul is being wrung out. I couldn't stop. My husband held me, my mom rubbed my back, and I just kept saying, "Why now? Why this moment?" Even retelling it makes me feel sick. That night, I barely slept. I kept watching the monitors in the NICU, whispering to my baby that I was sorry, that I shouldn't have let her in, that I should have protected him better. I felt like I'd somehow cursed at him by letting all that hate into the room. The next day, I texted Janet. I said I was sorry for what I said, not because I forgave her, but because I didn't want to carry that bitterness into this new chapter of my life as a mother. I wanted to be better than the people who hurt me. Her reply, "I hope your son dies too so you feel what I feel." I don't even have words for what that did to me. I haven't responded. I probably never will. But now my dad says I owe her another apology, that I'm cruel and ungrateful. That I've never accepted Janet and I use the past as a weapon. But that's not true. I begged for her love as a child. I did everything she asked. I just reacted this time because I was in pain. Still, I keep asking myself, was it too far? Was what I said unforgivable? Am I in the wrong? After Janet sent that text, "I hope your son dies too so you feel what I feel," something in me just broke, not snapped like before. This wasn't rage or fury or even sorrow. It was something colder, emptier, like someone had scooped the breath out of my lungs and replaced it with ice water. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even tell my husband right away. I just stared at the message, blinking over and over until my vision blurred. I left it on read and turned my phone face down on the hospital tray. For the first time in days, I felt quiet. And then I got up and asked the nurse to wheel me to the NICU. My baby, Eli, is tiny. His whole hand fits inside the curve of my thumb. He was breathing on his own for the first time that day, which the nurses called a miracle. And I just sat there, watching the rise and fall of his tiny chest, whispering, "You're safe, you're safe, you're safe," until my throat ached. That became my ritual. I stopped thinking about Janet or my dad or what anyone said or didn't say. I poured everything I had into my son. My husband brought me coffee and clean shirts. My mom stayed nearby and handled everything else, calls, updates, even social media. I didn't want anyone to know anything except that Eli was alive, but nothing is ever simple in my family. 2 days after that text, my dad came back. I was in my hospital room, pumping milk for Eli when I heard a knock. I assumed it was a nurse or my husband, but no, it was him. He looked tired, maybe older than I remembered. He didn't smile. He just stood in the doorway and said, "We need to talk." I didn't want to, God, I didn't have the energy, but I said okay, and he came in. He sat in the chair by the window and looked around the room like it offended him. Then he said, "I'm disappointed in you." Just like that, no build-up, no preface, I didn't say anything. He went on, "Janet is devastated. You brought up her worst pain in the ugliest way imaginable, and now she's having panic attacks. You've always made her feel like she wasn't part of this family." At that point, I finally said, "She told me she hopes my son dies." He had the audacity to wave it off, and said, "She was upset. You can't hold on to words said in grief." Grief? What about mine? I just stared at him and then I asked, "Did you even read what she wrote?" He looked away. "She told me what she said. She regrets it." "Then why hasn't she said that to me?" He didn't have an answer. He just looked at me like I was the problem. And that's when I realized he always did this. Always. When I was 8 and Janet cut my hair off because I rolled my eyes. When I was 13 and she refused to let me eat for a day because I called her Janet instead of Mom. When I was 16 and I cried at dinner because she mocked my acne in front of her friends, he never said anything. Or worse, he told me I needed to try harder to get along. This was just another version of that. Me bleeding in a hospital bed, begging for peace, and him demanding I apologize to the woman who just cursed my baby's life. I told him to leave. He didn't argue, didn't yell. He just stood up and said, "I hope you don't expect us to be around for the baby's milestones if you keep acting like this." I was so stunned I laughed. Like, really laughed. I said, "You mean my baby, the one your wife hopes dies?" He didn't answer, just walked out. I broke down again after he left. My mom found me sitting on the edge of the bed, shaking, with milk spilled on the floor. She cleaned it up without a word, then hugged me and said, "Let him go, sweetheart." But how do you let go of your own father? That night, I did something drastic. I blocked both of them, Janet and my dad, on everything. My husband supported me. My mom was relieved. But I kept waiting for the guilt to hit me again, like it had the first time. It never did. Instead, what came was space. And in that space, something grew. I started journaling every day, just a few minutes between feedings and skin-to-skin time with Eli. I wrote letters to him. I wrote memories I hadn't thought of in years. I wrote about my stepbrother, Aaron, and the way he used to sneak me candy when Janet wasn't looking, or how he came out to me before anyone else because he said I was the only person who wouldn't judge. I cried writing those letters, but it helped. More than therapy had, honestly, because for the first time I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was just telling the truth. 2 weeks passed. Then, without warning, my dad's sister, my Aunt Carla, showed up at the hospital. She's always been the black sheep of the family. She lives in Oregon, travels a lot, and doesn't talk to Janet much. She heard from my cousin about what happened and came straight out. She brought me fresh pajamas and a carton of orange juice. She didn't ask for the full story. She just said, "I'm here, tell me what you need." I told her everything, all of it, from the emergency C-section to Janet's text, and for once, someone in the family didn't try to minimize it. Carla listened. She cried when I talked about Aaron, then she held my hand and said, "You're not crazy, and you're not cruel, you were hurt, and you're allowed to defend yourself." I didn't realize how badly I needed someone to say that. Later that night, Carla told me something I didn't expect, that when Aaron was 17, he told Carla he was scared of his mom, that he felt like she only loved him when he was useful or quiet, and that when he came out, she made him feel like he was defective. "He said you were the only reason he didn't leave sooner," Carla whispered. I couldn't stop crying after that. The guilt is still there, don't get me wrong. I wish I hadn't said what I did at that moment. I wish it hadn't come out that way, but now I understand why it came out. It was years of silence breaking all at once. And maybe I didn't say it for Janet. Maybe I said it for Aaron. A few days after Aunt Carla arrived, things started to shift in small, subtle ways, like sunlight peeking through a crack in the curtains. My body was still sore and swollen, my sleep was non-existent, and Eli was still in the NICU, but I was breathing again. Not just surviving, but breathing. Carla stayed for almost a week. She brought books, folded my laundry, and even reorganized the little NICU corner where my husband and I kept snacks and breast pump parts. It was like she stepped into the role of the family I had never really had, quiet, steady, and kind. She didn't ask for anything, didn't try to fix me, just gave me space to be exactly what I was, exhausted, overwhelmed, raw. One night, as we were walking back from the NICU, me pushing a pump cart, her holding my elbow because I was still wobbly, I asked her something I hadn't dared say out loud yet. "Do you think I was cruel?" She didn't answer right away. She said, "I think you were wounded. And I think when wounded people are cornered, they lash out to survive. I don't think what you said was worse than what she did, but I do think you're carrying more guilt than she ever will." That stuck with me, because she was right. Janet didn't even blink before saying those horrible things. But me, I couldn't stop replaying my words over and over like a movie on loop. That night after surgery, the hiss in my voice when I brought up Aaron, the look on my dad's face, but I also couldn't forget her words. "Maybe when that baby dies in the NICU, who says that? And then, I hope your son dies too." I remember thinking, is this who I was expected to keep making space for? After Carla left, things were quiet. The kind of quiet that almost feels eerie. I didn't hear from my dad. No calls, no texts, not even a like on the NICU update my husband posted on Facebook. Nothing from Janet, of course. I blocked her and thank God for that. For a while, I convinced myself it was fine, that maybe no contact was what I always needed. That being alone with my husband, Eli, and my mom was enough. And for a while it was, until Eli crashed. It was day 18. I remember because we had just gotten the news he'd passed 2 pounds for the first time. My husband and I had gone down to the cafeteria to grab coffee. We were gone maybe 15 minutes. When we came back up, a nurse was waiting for us outside the NICU. Her face was pale. "Your son's oxygen levels dropped," she said. "They're working on stabilizing him now. He's back on the ventilator." Time stopped. I didn't feel my legs move, but somehow I ended up in the chair next to his incubator, watching as 3 nurses and a neonatologist moved around him, calmly but urgently. My husband stood behind me, hand on my shoulder, silent. For the next 48 hours, we didn't leave the hospital. I didn't shower. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at Eli through the plastic wall, praying to a God I didn't even believe in anymore. I told him I'd give anything. That I'd forgive anyone, that I'd forget everything if only my baby could stay. He pulled through, because he's stronger than I'll ever be. And when his color came back, when the ventilator settings were lowered and the nurse smiled and said, "He's stable," I felt my knees finally buckle beneath the weight of it all. That night, I cried harder than I ever had, and then I picked up my phone. I didn't unblock Janet. I didn't call my dad. I opened my notes app, and I wrote a message I never planned to send. You don't know what it feels like to watch your baby fight for his life unless you've been there. But you used that as a weapon. You took the deepest fear of my life and spat it in my face. You'll never know what it did to me. But I hope someday you realize what it cost you. Then I closed the app. I didn't send it. That wasn't the point. I needed to get it out. And then, as if the universe was listening, something I didn't expect happened. My dad showed up. It was the first time I'd seen him in nearly 3 weeks. He looked hollow, pale, like he hadn't shaved or slept. He didn't ask to come into the NICU. He waited in the family room and sent a message to my husband. "Tell her I just want 5 minutes." I didn't want to see him, but some part of me, maybe the part that still remembered being 8 years old and waiting for him to defend me, agreed. He looked small. For the first time in my life, he looked like a man instead of a father. He started crying almost immediately. Not sobbing, just quiet tears slipping down his face. He said, "I didn't know. I didn't want to know, but Carla told me everything. About Aaron, about what you told her, about Janet." He paused. "She lied to me about what she said to you. She told me you were hysterical, that you were making it up." He looked at me, eyes bloodshot. I believed her. I always believed her, because it was easier. I didn't speak. I didn't trust my voice. He said, "I failed you." It was the first true apology I'd ever gotten from him. No excuses, no backhanded justifications. Just, "I failed you." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. It was a printout of a group email Janet had sent to her church group the night after our fight. In it, she bragged about standing her ground and said she told me, "You'll understand when tragedy comes knocking." He found it in her sent folder after getting suspicious. "I left," he said. I blinked. "She said she meant what she said, that you deserved to hurt like she did, that you were never really family anyway." I didn't cry. I just sat there in stunned silence. He told me he packed his bags, that he was staying with a friend, that he wasn't asking for anything from me, just space to start making things right. He said, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know I'm not going back." That night, I sat by Eli's incubator again, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like the world was spinning out of control. I felt still. There was a long road ahead. I knew that. I still hadn't decided if I wanted my dad in Eli's life. I didn't know if I'd ever speak to Janet again, but something shifted. The shame that had been poisoning me slowly started to drain away, and I realized maybe I'm not the villain of this story after all the days that followed were quieter, not emotionally, but in that suspended way that comes after a storm. I kept waiting for another wave to crash, another crisis, another cruel text, but there was nothing. Just the soft hum of the NICU machines, the measured beeps, and the flutter of my baby's tiny fingers as he slowly got stronger. Eli started breathing without assistance again. Then he opened his eyes for the first time. I'll never forget that. They were the same slate gray my eyes were when I was born, and I held my breath like if I moved too fast, he might disappear. He looked right at me, blinking like the light of the world was too much to take in, and for a moment, I forgot about all of it. Janet. My dad, the screaming in hospital rooms, the years of trying to prove I was worth love. I had my son, and he looked at me like I was home. That weekend, my dad texted, a long message, apologizing again, telling me he was seeing a therapist, asking if he could send Eli a gift, not to visit, not to show up, just something small for his grandson. I told him he could. It arrived 2 days later. A stuffed rabbit, soft and gray, with a hand-sewn name tag, Eli. No note from Janet. No apology from her either. My mom finally said what she'd been biting her tongue over for years. "That woman will never change, but you don't have to carry her anymore." I've thought a lot about that, about what we inherit. The pain, the silence, the blame. Janet used to say love was earned. That respect was only given to people who deserved it. I remember being 9, sobbing because she threw away a birthday card I made by hand. My dad told me I had to understand that Janet grew up rough, that I had to have compassion for her. But I've realized now, compassion doesn't mean surrendering your boundaries. I had spent so much of my life shrinking around Janet to keep the peace. And when I finally stood up, when I finally screamed that enough was enough, the people who really saw me didn't turn away. Aaron would have seen me. He would have hugged me in that hospital room and said, "About time." I keep thinking about him, about what he went through, about the shame she weaponized against him. Did anyone ever tell him he wasn't too much or too soft or too wrong? I wish I could say it to him now, so I say it to Eli instead. Every night I hold him and I whisper, "You are safe. You are loved. You are enough." That's the legacy I want to pass on, not bitterness, not cruelty disguised as tough love, just truth and tenderness and safety. Eli came home last week. We spent 41 days in the NICU. Every single day, I sat beside him, held his hand, sang to him, cried next to him, and promised him that no matter what kind of family he was born into, he would always be protected from it. We brought him home in a tiny knitted onesie a nurse made for him. My husband cried carrying him through the front door. My mom decorated the living room with balloons and a sign that said, "Welcome home, little warrior." It's been surreal. Sleep-deprived, messy, magical. But one thing keeps coming back to me. Was I really right in saying what I said? Even now, after everything, that question still sits in my chest like a stone, because I still remember the look on Janet's face when I brought up Aaron. I still hear my dad saying, "I'm ashamed of you." But then I think about what she said. I think about how she tried to force her way into a moment that wasn't hers, how she said I'd understand when my baby died, and then told me she hoped he would. And still, I was the one who apologized, because somewhere deep down, I was still trying to be good, but I've started to redefine what that means. Being good doesn't mean being quiet. Being good doesn't mean being compliant. Being good doesn't mean swallowing pain so someone else can feel better about themselves. Being good to me now means being honest about what happened, about what it did to me, about who I am now. I'm not the same person I was before I gave birth. Trauma reshapes you. Birth remakes you. And truth frees you. Do I regret what I said? No, because even if I hadn't said it out loud, it would have kept festering inside me like a wound that never closed. And I think Aaron deserves anyone, to finally say the thing he never got to. Janet may never apologize. She may spend the rest of her life playing the victim, rewriting the story to make herself the wounded one. She might tell people I exaggerated, or lashed out, or was too hormonal. She's already done that, but I won't play that role anymore. Not for her. Not for my dad. Not for anyone. I'm not the villain. I'm not the broken daughter or the difficult stepchild. I'm a mother. And I will never let Eli wonder if he's worthy of love the way I did. Because for the first time in my life, I chose me, and I chose my son.
Thank you for watching. As always, make sure to like and subscribe for more Reddit stories. Until next time.